And these changes were then memorialized in new standard operating procedures or SOPs that could be read by current and new employees down the road to help standardize a more efficient investigatory process. And you can see the difference. As it turns out, compliance with the 180-day timeline for completing administrative investigations of misconduct has gone from only 50% were completed on time in 2018 to 94% in the first quarter of 2019. So that's a pretty impressive increase. Also, the stages, I do have a map here. There's different stages of the investigative process, and we summarize these stages and analyze them. And you can see that over the last year, from that the percentage of cases that were overdue at each stage has gone from almost 40% down to single digits, 7 or 8%. So again, more evidence that they are cleaning up the process, making it more efficient, and getting the investigations done in a more timely manner, because that's also fair to the complainant as well as the officer involved. Training. That should say paragraph 84. I don't know why it says 81. I apologize for that. PPB's only remaining requirement for substantial compliance here was paragraph 84, which requires them to increase their use of role-playing scenarios and interactive exercises. From the very start, I've been pushing PPB to follow best practices and evidence-based policing to utilize what is a procedural justice framework in training, which would really help prevent escalation of tensions and reduce the need to use force to gain compliance by community members. Procedural justice, in a nutshell there, I list the 4 basic principles. Voice means the officers should give the community member a voice and let them talk and explain their situation and not make just commands and orders. They should respect them, show respect and dignity for everyone in the community. Neutrality means make decisions that are unbiased, not based on gender, race, sexual orientation, anything like that. And demonstrate trustworthy motives, that the community member can trust them because they're showing concern for their welfare or their situation, which can occur through empathy or compassion or various other things, suggestions and help, tips like that. For years I've argued that lecturing, however, in the classroom about these principles is not enough. Officers need to practice the skills implied by these principles, just as they practice firing their weapons and other things. Practice self-defense. They need to practice these social skills. PPB now has done that successfully as part of the fall-in service. Recently they introduced this training scenario that was pretty sophisticated and allow officers to practice their procedural justice and communication skills and receive individualized feedback during a debriefing session. And that's really important, individualized feedback. We observed this training and have concluded that it satisfies the requirement of paragraph 84. Now, going beyond the requirements of the settlement agreement, under the new chief, they've institutionalized procedural justice as a core component of their training program rather than a standalone piece. So, in other words, it's integrated into nearly all of their classes at the training academy, which I give them credit for. And the impact is starting to show up in the citywide surveys. Satisfaction with police contacts went up pretty dramatically from 2016 to 2019, for example, overall with most people, not with everybody. Okay. Community engagement. We've been waiting for this all night. Okay. And the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, PCCEP. Paragraph 142. We've monitored the formation and functioning of PCCEP since mid-2018. And since your first meeting in November of 2018, which is almost a year now, PCCEP has met regularly and provided multiple opportunities for community input on police-community relations. At this point, we've narrowed our compliance focus to key elements of paragraph 142, although PCCEP did not have to substantially comply on there's a massive list in 142 to achieve substantial compliance, even though you're free to do that. Here are the key tasks that I listed on the slide there and the outcomes. So PCCEP has held regular meetings, subcommittee meetings, and town hall meetings with community input, such as this one. PCCEP has a working relationship now with PPB, providing input on PPB's annual report, metrics, and community engagement plan. From our perspective, from my perspective, PCCEP has the bylaws, the group values, the diverse membership, the leadership, and the city's support needed to function as a legitimate body. Based on our observations, PCCEP also has the critical self-assessment skills needed for survival and adaptation to its environment. For example, the group has prepared a report on the challenges they face, so that they're not just naively moving ahead here. They know what some of the issues are, and I know they've discussed them as well in the meetings, and are not afraid to be honest and take a critical look at the obstacles they face. In addition to these activities, PCCEP has streamlined the recommendation process to make it more accessible and transparent. Based on all of this activity and more, the group's resilience in the face of inevitable challenges such as turnover and meeting attendance, we have come to the conclusion that PCCEP is functioning as a legitimate body for community engagement, and we can have assigned them substantial compliance with paragraph 142. Okay, one more. This one is about the city and the police bureau side of the community engagement component, paragraphs 145, 146, 150. Based on progress in the second corner, those are the ones remaining. And here's our assessment. On 145, PPB has developed a working, transparent relationship with PCCEP and has developed a reasonable community engagement plan with input from PCCEP. And they have taken PCCEP's recommendations seriously. We should note that the community engagement plan was adopted by the Portland City Council on October 2nd, 2019. Paragraph 146, PCCEP presented the community survey results. PPB presented the community survey results at PCCEP's July 23rd meeting to inform the work of PCCEP, and they also used the results to inform the development and implementation of the community engagement plan. For example, they noted that the community expressed concern about excessive force against persons experiencing a mental health crisis or communities of color. In response, they have beefed up their plan. Their community engagement plan gives increased attention to implicit bias training and procedural justice. They're also currently working on training modules for cultural competency for all officers and are creating a pool of community members to help with training. I think that's important to actually get community members involved in training. I know La Kiana's done some of that, and some other folks have too. They're planning additional councils for community involvement, and they're exploring PCCEP's recommendation on truth and reconciliation. But the community engagement plan of PPB is a plan. The chief wants to continue this dialogue with PCCEP and others to refine that thinking. Paragraph 150, PPB has released its annual report in a timelier fashion than it did the year before, as we had recommended and PCCEP had recommended, and presented it in each precinct area and at the city council meeting. In summary, because of this work, PPB has substantially complied with paragraphs 145, 146, and 150 of the settlement agreement. All right, now, as I bring closure to this, I want to ask, what does substantial compliance mean, since that's kind of a debated subject here. Most simply, it means the city and PPB have complied with the legal terms of the settlement agreement. But if anyone thinks we're just checking boxes here, I spent the first 2 years fighting about that issue. I'm not a box checker. I am a person who believes in documenting the quality of implementation. We spent many hours focusing on that, and we held the city's feet to the fire to ensure high quality implementation of changes. And that was painful in the first couple of years, but we finally got through that. Also, substantial compliance, however, does not mean that PPB is flawless or that there's no room for improvement in many areas. I'm sure there is. This is not an end, it's a beginning of a process. Thanks to the settlement agreement, I believe the Police Bureau is much further down the road of organizational improvement and functioning more as a what I call learning organization. I've said this before. Learning organizations are ones that have systems in place where they're constantly collecting data about themselves internally and their external environment. And they're auditing themselves and they're evaluating their programs, and they have feedback loops built in so that they can adapt and adjust easily and quickly to their environment. And PPB has, over 5 years that we've been monitoring this, is much, much better at that now. And so they have the feedback loops built in. They evaluate. They have EIS to look for which officers are way outside the mean. They have evaluations of their training programs. They audit all their force reports. I could go on. So there's a lot going on like that. There's a bunch of audits set up. But anyway, let me just finish here. What are the next steps? The Department of Justice, DOJ, will submit their report later this year, soon, sometime, the next month or so. I can't say, I don't know. But DOJ, it's important for me to note to you, they're the final authority on whether the city has achieved substantial compliance with the settlement agreement, not the COCO. We're independent. This is a strange arrangement in Portland, unlike some other cities, but we are independent of them. They're independent. You guys are independent of them. But they have the final say about what is substantial compliance. They do listen to us, and we collect a lot of data and look at a lot and assess a lot of factors. Now, once achieved, the city is required to stay in substantial compliance for at least 1 year. So this isn't over for those of you who think we're walking away from this. We will evaluate compliance during what was called the maintenance year and report whether the established remedies are in fact durable. They have to have durable remedies and remain in place at the same level of commitment in 2020 that they were in 2019. Again, we're not checking boxes. We'll do an in-depth analysis. We'll report any discrepancies or deviations to the Justice Department and Judge Simon. Paragraph 178A says that substantial compliance means that the violations must be, quote, minor or occasional, not systematic. So we will have to keep an eye on that. I can just a footnote if you guys want to read any of Sam Walker's work, a colleague of mine. He's looked at reforms in many different cities. These things are beneficial. I'm making the argument that PPB is a better organization than it was 5 years ago. But they can also fall back. Some cities fall back. So you do have to keep an eye on it. My point, our job is limited and defined by the courts. I don't think the job of PCCEP is. And I want to close by just making a couple comments on the resolution to defer substantial compliance and I didn't know about this until today, so my comments may not seem as informed as they could be. But I do, first of all, on a positive note, I do like the instinct of the PCCEP to hold PPB accountable to a high standard and to have high standards as to what would be excellent policing. I guess, though, my first impression is that pushing back on compliance when we've already done this 5 years of work is not really the best way to go. I think that, and I would say that we have been in agreement with DOJ and they've been in agreement with us on most things. I know Dan out here in the audience will say we disagreed on some things. He keeps records of this. But generally, I would be surprised if DOJ reaches a lot of different conclusions when they do the official statement here in another month or two. So we're not that far apart. So I think my feeling would be you can do that, and I encourage you to do whatever you need to do, believe me. But I think it might be better to look forward and ask the question, what can you achieve? How can you achieve the outcomes of greatest interest to the PCCEP? And you don't, I'm not saying you have to live within the confines of the settlement agreement. You don't. You were appointed by the mayor to do whatever you think is important. The settlement agreement is one of your tasks. Chief Outlaw has made it clear that she's has an open door on this draft community engagement plan. What dialogue do you want to have with her on that, and what are the various ways community engagement can go? What does that look like? So, and I guess my last thought would be, at some point we have to pass the baton to you guys and to the city, the communities, so I would encourage you to look to yourselves in the community and not COCO or DOJ, that it's time for a community voice to take the lead and not outsiders. So, thank you. Oh, I should just say the last slide. If anyone has feedback on our report that they don't get to say tonight, or feel free to email it to us at that email address by November 4th. Thank you. Because it's a draft at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Rosenbaum, for that thorough presentation. We've got two sections in this now. We're going to have PCCEP feedback, and then we're going to open it up to community feedback. What I'd like to do is start on either one end or the other, and we'll just go down the row and give everybody roughly 2 minutes to make any comments or feedback. And I'm just going to streamline the process, so I don't know if Patrick, you want to start? Wait, Patrick, start. You want to start with that? Yeah, I'm going to actually start with Yolanda.